ever. And in fact, Lenin, again, quite says this. Or actually, sorry, one more preface. You often hear, where countries engage in trade, they never go to war. We've never gone to war with a country that has a McDonald's. That is the stupidest thing that anyone has ever, well, a lot of stupid things. That is one of the stupidest things that anyone has ever said. It is the competition, the fierce and cutthroat competition, that leads imperialist countries to go to war. World War I, World War II, the various Cold War fiascos and engagements, right? It is trade, right, and capital that generates these conflicts. And as Lenin says, finance, capital, and the trusts do not diminish, but increase the differences in the rate of growth of various parts of the world economy. Once the relation of force has changed, what other solution of the contradictions can be found under capitalism but that of force? And of course, Lenin points out something that's really interesting, is the most imperialized nations in the world also have the greatest foreign creation of railroads. Just like, you'll notice, the countries that are making the most number of refineries today are imperialized nations. It's the Niger Delta. It's Iraq, right? And probably, relatively soon, it will be Venezuela. Imperialism, for all of the production that it brings, just like the railroads, right, were production and transportation, only serve the capitalist interests. You build railroads because you want to get the stuff out of the country in the most efficient way possible. We reconstruct Iraq and Afghanistan, even if it has apparently humanitarian purposes, because this will be the most efficient way for us to extract resources, both material and productive, both capital and actual, from a country. And it's important that we, again, and I can't stress this enough, imperialism is never, never humanitarian. So, this leads us to the flip side of imperialism, which is national liberation. Now, at the risk of sounding overly Hegelian, imperialism is complete. And I mean that. It's finished. Which is not to say that we have no imperialism today. We have more imperialism today than perhaps we've ever had. But, as Lenin says, the characteristic feature of this period, he concludes, this is Lenin quoting, I believe, Hobson. But in any case, he says, the characteristic feature of this period, he concludes, is therefore the division of Africa and Polynesia. As there are no unoccupied territories, that is, territories that do not belong to any state in Asia or America, it is necessary to amplify Supin's conclusion, he was an economist, and say that the characteristic feature of the period under review is the final partitioning of the globe. Final, not in the sense that repartition is impossible. On the contrary, repartitions are possible and inevitable, but in the sense that colonial policy of the capitalist countries has completed the seizure of unoccupied territories on our planet. For the first time, the world is completely divided up, so that in the future, only a redivision is possible, i.e., territories can only pass from one owner to another, instead of passing from ownerless territory to an owner. In this case, this is why imperialism has been so linked as a Marxist-Leninist concept. And anti-imperialist anarchists do exist and should be commended, but don't have the theoretical framework to deal with this. Because at this point, the notion of Yemen farmers, uninfluenced by state corruption, untouched by the domination of capitalism, is finished. There was a point when that could happen. There was a point where the Zulu could have forced out the Boers and could have forced out the English. There was a point in which the Wampanoags could have butchered and driven the Pilgrims into the sea, and perhaps should have. There was a point in which the Indian kingdoms could have unified and stood up against the East Indian Company. That time is gone. The time of anti-imperialism, in the sense of being free from imperialism, no longer exists. And again, this is perhaps where I'm too Hegelian. We are inured in imperialism. And all anti-imperialist struggles are national liberation struggles. So what does this mean? National liberation aims to put control back in the hands of the people rather than the imperialist nations. So, for example, there was no point in which Palestine was going to go back to being an unintegrated state. There was no time in which Palestine could have been free from the state strictures. Instead, their fight is one of national liberation. You either liberate your nation from the British, or you liberate your nation from the Israelis, but you need to liberate your nation. And that national liberation is itself a liberation of a nation, owned, no longer unowned, right, of which people live, but a nation owned by the people, right? And so this is the essence of a national liberation struggle. Now, about national liberation struggles, we should always be critical. Always be critical of any struggle, right? Capitalism so often, hides its face in the mask of humanitarianism, so we must always be critical. However, we must also always support national liberation against capitalist imperialism. We are at the stage where our world market is connected and shackled by the chains of imperialism. And today, to be a socialist, to be a communist, to be an anti-capitalist, entails that we always remain anti-imperialist and struggle for national liberation and support struggles for national liberation. Thank you very much.